Howdy there, Isaac here. Last we left off, Raditz discovered Namek had fallen and was confronted by Frieza and the Ginyus. Can the four pure Saiyans survive Namek? Without further ado, let's see what may have happened if Raditz was sent to Namek. The story starts now. Frieza, angered that a low-class Saiyan would dare to land a punch on him, used his telekinesis to pick up Raditz and fling him into what was left of the nearby cave. He then followed up with a few death beams, though none were intended to kill the Saiyan. He still needed to play with his prey before ending his pathetic life, after all. When Raditz powered up, blowing off the rubble and charging Frieza, the Emperor easily caught said punch, smirking before blowing Raditz away with a large ki blast. The son of Bardock screamed out, his Saiyan armor melting away while smoke trailed off his body. There was no way Raditz could win. Right now, the best course of action was to retreat. That was the only way to keep Kakarot alive, even if it meant not avenging the Namekians. A death beam struck Raditz on the shoulder, the pain causing him to fall to his knees, submitting to the power that was Frieza. He had lost. Maybe he really was just a low-class warrior. My, and this was the hope of Namek that old slug kept jabbering about? You gave up far quicker than the others. Even the children struggled in the end. Frieza shot another beam into Raditz, sending him prone on the ground. The Emperor closed the distance between the two, putting his foot on Raditz's head and slowly putting more and more pressure on his skull. I'll crush the final remnants of Namek here and now. Ha! To think a weak, pathetic monkey like you was supposed to protect these slugs. You failed, monkey. This entire race is gone, and soon, so too will yours. Raditz watched as Frieza pointed a finger towards Goku, who was busy fighting the whole Ginyu force at once. Raditz tried to call out, but Frieza increased the pressure on his skull, causing the Saiyan to fall silent. In all respects, what the Emperor had said was true. He was too weak to protect the Namekians, and now, too weak to protect his brother. He had become selfish, taking extra time to train with Kakarot. He even believed Turnip could turn good, change her Saiyan ways and live peacefully on Earth, that everyone could just live peacefully, while Frieza and his empire continued to subjugate worlds. Bardock would be nothing but disappointed in Raditz. But as the Saiyan watched on, he noticed Frieza had seemingly become distracted, along with some of the Ginyus. The Saiyan then noticed a shadow, a large one, but that shouldn't be possible on Namek since it had 3 suns. He looked over as much as he could and saw a giant tree sprouting from the planet. So that's where Turnip had gone, huh? Guess she really hadn't changed. A Saiyan to the brutal end. Perhaps that was what they needed, though. Now that not only the Namekians were gone, but the planet would soon be as well, Raditz should let go of that part of him. Perhaps what they needed right now was a Saiyan. Noticing Frieza had somewhat loosened his grip, Raditz reached up and elbowed Frieza's knee, causing it to bend towards the side, an audible crunch sounding out. The Emperor fell to the ground and was about to blast Raditz when the Saiyan threw a blast right into his face, blinding Frieza momentarily. The Ginyus had jumped back into action, but that's when Goldo gets blasted from behind. Vegeta then bursts in, kicking both Recoome and Jace in the face, instantly snapping both their necks. He also tries to blast Ginyu away, but that's when Raditz grabs both of them and begins flying away as fast as possible. Whilst Vegeta is livid that they even think about retreating, Goku understands as he watches Frieza transform, healing his previous injuries whilst Ginyu goes over, presumably reporting what happened and where they retreated towards. Goku and even Vegeta knew there was no way to win that, but still, they could have at least finished off the Ginyus. Goku and Vegeta argue in the back, but once the trio are far enough away, Raditz tells them to shut up. Now, Frieza is going to rush towards Turnip in that giant tree. Vegeta, I assume you have a plan since you wouldn't have come back otherwise. Spit it out, now! Kakarot noticed Raditz was much more on edge, and Vegeta seemed to get a little fired up, happy that the pineapple-haired Saiyan was finally acting like one of them. Well, now that we know Frieza can transform, this may not work, but since we still have those beans, if you were to blast me, then we could. Raditz knew exactly what Vegeta was getting at, and whilst it may work, Vegeta was not going first. Fine, let's try it, but you'll be the one blasting me. Huh, happily. Across the planet, Turnip was anxiously awaiting the last tree of might to bear fruit. Several had begun to sprout, and they were quite large, but she knew picking them now wouldn't grant her the boost she needed. However, based on the key signatures of Frieza and Ginyu, which were quickly approaching, she may have to eat one of the fruits sooner rather than later. If need be, she'd destroy a few of the fruits as well, since letting them fall into Frieza's hand would spell disaster. Turnip looked out towards the darkening Namek landscapes, able to see several miles out since she was flying. After experiencing Earth and seeing the beauty it held, Turnip could somewhat appreciate what this planet once had. It was a shame that the Tree of Might was parasitic, but this is what had to be done. This was their only way of beating Frieza. Speaking of the Tyrant, he was nearly here. Based on his current speed, Turnip had a minute tops, so she floated up next to the largest fruit that had sprouted. Once she saw the giant space lizard approaching, in spite of his new grotesque look, she immediately picked the fruit and ate it. What a peculiar last meal. But I suppose it makes sense for a sane woman to think about food before her death. Frieza was feeling confident in his victory, especially whilst in his second form, seeing the remaining Saiyans as nothing but prey for him to hunt. But Ginyu? Well, the last number he read was 900k on his scouter before it exploded. Turnip had spent her whole life being called a food worker, someone who shouldn't be on the front lines, and usually it pissed her off. But hearing Frieza say it was satisfying, as she knew what he'd soon be experiencing. As Frieza continued his taunting, Turnip bulked up, power soaring through her veins unlike any she'd felt prior. The blackening earth of Namek shook as she powered up and teleported in front of the Emperor, delivering a haymaker straight to his jaw, knocking it loose before firing off a huntress arrow into his stomach. Ginyu and Birder, the last remaining members of the force, were awestruck. In fact, they could hardly even perceive the movements of Turnip or Frieza once he retaliated. This battle, it was on a whole nother level from how Goku or Raditz were. Just how the hell had this Saiyan grown in such a short amount of time? Well, Birder had an idea, pointing towards a tree and its ever-growing fruit. Whilst Turnip and Frieza exchanged blows, Ginyu and Birder flew up to examine the fruit even closer, although when reaching out for one, a hand smacked Ginyu's away. Ginyu looked up to see someone that looked eerily similar to Goku, though this person had a wicked smile and 5 soldiers behind him. Only a few miles away, Goku, Vegeta, and Raditz were flying towards the Tree of Might. The latter two Saiyans had spent the past few minutes blasting each other, then healing, and repeating until only one being was left. By now, they far surpassed Frieza in his first form, even if Raditz felt some shame for using such a tactic. The trio could all sense the fight going on between Turnip and Frieza, as well as another fight going on between Ginyu and a group of strangers. Whilst Vegeta and Goku had no idea who they were, Raditz knew exactly who these fiends were. Turles must have been waiting for Turnip to plant the tree. Perhaps this was even their plan this whole time. After Frieza was dealt with, Raditz would make sure to have a nice long chat with the female Saiyan. Once the trio arrived on the scene, they saw Frieza transforming once more, evolving into his third form, once again confident that victory would be his. Now, while Turnip was terrified of this new form, Vegeta could tell, even on a bad day, he was the stronger of the two. Out of my way, woman! Let Vegeta, prince of all the Saiyans, finish Frieza once and for all! Vegeta pushed Turnip out of the way, raising a fist towards the Emperor before promising this wouldn't be quick nor painless. The two charge at each other, but Vegeta is just slightly faster, able to get a kick in first, forcing Frieza on the back foot. What? Even in his third form, these monkeys were able to keep up? Had they just been playing with him earlier, sending in their weakest fighters first so he'd think they were all weak? Were they just playing with him? Mocking him whilst he fought Raditz and Turnip? Well, he'd teach them. He'd go into his final form and eradicate the last of these damn Saiyans. But Frieza never got a chance to transform, as every time he tried, Vegeta would either close the gap or charge up a Gallic gun. While none of these attacks were particularly deadly for the Emperor, they were beginning to hurt. They really hurt. Whilst clashing once more with Vegeta, Frieza thought back to the stories his father told. How the Saiyans were capable of growing strong enough to one day surpass them. How the legendary Super Saiyan would eventually appear. As the fight carried on, Frieza began to panic, seeing the fierce confidence shining through Vegeta's eyes, feeling the sheer power and strength he possessed. Being convinced this was it. This was the legendary Super Saiyan. But, as every hunter will tell you, a wounded animal can sometimes be the most dangerous. Frieza flew high into the air, charging up the most powerful death ball this form allowed, before throwing it down towards Namek. While Vegeta was busy catching it and showing off just how strong he'd become, Frieza took the chance to transform one last time. Once the sphere of ki was thrown away, the Emperor launched a beam straight through Vegeta's shoulder, then his knee, then his other arm, and so on and so forth. Raditz and Goku had been busy taking care of the Ginyu and Crusher Corps, though the villains had gotten leagues stronger than they thought possible. Ginyu had sustained tons of damage, but he and Goku were fighting off Turles' lackeys, whilst Raditz and the evil Saiyan himself fought. Raditz could tell Turles had done some intense training in their time apart. Just how had he become so strong, though? Who was out there that could rival Frieza's third form? Oh, you have no idea of the warriors that exist out in the universe. Frieza is only pestering the northern galaxy, but the universe is so much bigger than that, and he has enemies everywhere, Turles said, delivering a devastating gut punch to Raditz. And yet you choose to fight me and not the Emperor himself. Well, we don't have to fight. All I require is my fruit, and then I'll leave you be. Wait, was Turles being serious? How could they let him have such dangerous fruit? Even if they did let him have those, would he actually let them be? No. Turles was a Saiyan. He was just being crafty, trying to trick Raditz into a false sense of security. The pineapple-haired Saiyan continued their fight, but before long, a beam pierced his chest, causing him to fall several hundred feet. Hitting the ground so hard, a small crater was formed. Raditz looked over to see one of the Crusher Corp members holding a smoking blaster, whilst Goku and Ginyu were thrown to the ground as well. Turles and his men swiftly gathered the fruit before flying off, but not before leaving Raditz a cryptic message. Try as you might, there are things far more frightening than Frieza. To be safe, or rule this galaxy, you'll need to be stronger than this. Once Turles left, and Raditz sensed Frieza transform once more, he knew they needed to move immediately. Despite the hole in his chest, the Saiyan had just enough strength to crawl towards his brother. Kakarot had some pretty serious injuries, though nothing lethal. It looks like the Crusher Corps were going easy on him, or perhaps were told to do non-lethal damage. Maybe Turles wanted them to survive? Perhaps in order to finish off Frieza? But if that was the case, why didn't he just team up with them? Oh well, it didn't matter. What was important was that Kakarot get a senzu. The older Saiyan pulled out the final bean and was about to feed it to Goku, but he refused. Kakarot told Raditz to eat it instead, as he was the stronger of the two and would hopefully become strong enough to defeat Frieza. Raditz admits he thought about that, but he desperately wanted Kakarot to be healed. If anyone deserved to live through this, it was Kakarot. He was truly the future of the Saiyan race. Vegeta, Turnip, even Raditz himself. They were too far gone. They represented the past. They deserved to die out here with Frieza. But Goku wasn't having any of it. He zipped his lips shut and refused to take the bean, no matter how hard Raditz shoved it in his face. No matter how human Goku was, guess he still had that same stubbornness. Fine. Raditz would eat the bean, then use every ounce of his power to buy time. However, once Raditz was all healed up, the Zenkai he got was nowhere near as strong as he hoped it would be. Right now, he'd be lucky to stalemate with 50% Frieza. However, that's when a voice popped into his head. Ahem, Raditz, this is King Kai. All you need to do is hold off Frieza. Your friend Krillin has a plan. Just keep Frieza occupied. Just then, Raditz felt several hundreds of life forms reappear on Namek, and knew what had happened. This King Kai, whoever he was, told Kami to resurrect the Namekians in order to use these Dragon Balls. Hope had returned in the heart of the Saiyan, who charged Frieza, stopping him from killing Vegeta. Whilst Frieza was easily dealing with Raditz, he kept on fighting, using every single trick in the book to stay in the fight. Using ki to trip up the Emperor, using dirt and smoke to cloud his view, doing leg sweeps and eye pokes to continually mess with Frieza. Despite all this, the Saiyan was pushing himself to his limits in order to keep this up, while Frieza was casually doing so and hadn't sustained any real injuries. Sure, he was complaining about how much some of these attacks really hurt, but he stayed in the fight. Eventually, he used the same trick as he did with Vegeta, getting frustrated and throwing another death ball towards Namek. However, whilst Raditz was struggling to even hold the sphere back, Goku stood up and began charging a Kamehameha. Raditz smiled at his brother, thinking of how he was either foolish or brave for thinking he could help. But as the beam hit Frieza's death ball, Raditz felt it get just slightly lighter. He fired off a Shining Friday, and together he and Goku shot it out towards space. The two cheered, with Raditz even high-fiving his brother, but things could never stay so jovial with Frieza around. Just as the two were preparing to fight once more, a beam flew through Goku's chest. And unlike with Raditz, or even Vegeta, this beam went straight through Kakarot's heart. It was scary how Goku just seemingly went limp. It wasn't like the movies, where the two got to have several minutes to talk and say goodbye. Kakarot just gripped his chest and fell into his brother's arms. By the time Rats laid him on the ground, the life had faded from his eyes. "Do not worry, monkey. You'll soon be joining your dear friend. I won't make the same mistake twice." Frieza had walked right up to Raditz, pointing a finger right at his head, ready for an execution. However, in an instant the Saiyan turned around and grabbed Frieza's hand, nearly snapping it like a twig. When looking at the Saiyan, his hair was spiking up and flashing between gold and black. His pupils had completely disappeared, and an immense pressure was coming off of him. So this was the real legendary Super Saiyan. Frieza quickly tried to use his other hand, desperately going to launch another death beam, but Raditz caught that too. "Frieza, I'm going to kill you, Frieza!" But that is where we're going to leave things off for right now. If you enjoyed this part, I'd appreciate it if you guys ate the like button's parasitic fruit, or maybe even went Super Saiyan against that subscribe button. But even if you don't, I still appreciate you guys getting to this part of the video. The channel is still growing like crazy, and after seeing the reception to the Zarbon season finale, I'm very impressed. This series has also skyrocketed in views recently. I mean, seriously, you guys really like Raditz. And after the cliffhanger for last episode, quite a few people have been asking for this to return. Trust me, if I could, I would go back to 2 videos per week. That way you guys didn't have to wait so long. However, for both my sake and yours, I think this arrangement works well. Now, I should probably get to recording and editing this part. Well, I guess just the editing part now. You guys have a good day or night wherever you are. That's it for now. Bye-bye.